You know him as the longtime federal prosecutor, and now he is a defense lawyer in Southern California. How about it for David Katz, everybody?
Hi, great to be with you.
Hello, sir. I was worried about you as well last night as we huddled in place, looking at our phone at the various evacuation orders and the communities that were far flung. You know, it wasn't just the Palisades in Malibu. We saw Hollywood last night and into the Hollywood Hills and Studio City, and there's a randomness and a scary quality to all of this. So I'm glad you're in good shape today. And apparently you were not affected by the fires.
I wasn't affected by the fires, but I sure was by the winds. But I don't want to tell people my problems here. I heard you just talking about State Farm, but I was just on with my State Farm insurance agent. I've had them for 30 some years and still have them. And at least so far, knock on wood, they're treating me well. But yes, we had quite a bit of wind damage up in the hills. And I'm also battling a cold. And my wife and I are living in a hotel at the moment. But
Oh,
except for
no.
that, everything's hunky dory.
Well, I really appreciate you under those circumstances, then in particular, being with us today. Let me just ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Mark,
Yeah.
I'm here in an office. People may sometimes wonder about my background. I've never really explained it. But I'm sitting here in my office in Beverly Hills, which is on Beverly and Wilshire. It's a corner office right on here. And the gentleman behind me, that's the federal judge that I clerk for. And up above his portrait is when I became an assistant U.S. attorney, which was actually under the Reagan administration. And that was his attorney general, William French Smith, who signed my certificate. And we were very proud. I don't want to speak for Senator Adam Schiff, but I think he was one of them like me, that we had one signed by Smith and not one signed by Ed Meese.
Ed Meese, what a great reference. It's been so long. David Katz, let me just go right after the big question. Why can't Merrick Garland just release the report on his own?
Well, if we ever lose our democracy, the wags will say we lost it playing by all the rules of our old system. And Merrick Garland plays by all the rules. And one of the rules is you're supposed to let people who are mentioned in the report comment on it. And somebody can say, hey, wait a second, you said that I was on 29th Street. Well, I wasn't on 29th Street. You see, here's something which shows I was on 23rd. And if that really matters, why report in a huge official document that so many people are going to read that something happened on 29th Street? If it happened on 23rd Street, maybe the guy who owns a restaurant on 29th Street, right, would have some interest in that. And so those are the old rules, Mark. You just tell the targets, and especially the two people who are not President Trump, those two valets and the property manager who worked in Mar-a-Lago. But of course, they've done exactly what Merrick Garland should have predicted. I mean, this was one, you didn't need Katz for this one. There was no question that once they saw that report, that Trump's lawyers would try to find every way they could to get some court not to release it. Would they have thought to go to Judge Cannon? They wouldn't have thought to ever try to do anything but go to their favorite judge in America, Luce Cannon herself, on the pretext that, well, this is a case that has to do with these two men, and these two men have an interest. They don't want that report about Mar-a-Lago to come out with their names. They want to correct something. They weren't on 29th Street. They were on 23rd Street. It said the guy didn't go left. He went right. They want to correct this and that. They want the whole report delayed until it can be corrected, blah, blah, blah. But the farce of all of this is that she has apparently reached out in her order and even enjoined the release of the one that has nothing to do with them. And that has nothing to do about Mar-a-Lago. We've heard that this is a 2-volume report, and one report, one volume, is just about what happened with January 6th and which happened in the Washington, D.C. case. So she's obviously overreached, but as long as she issued an injunction to answer your question, first of all, it's perilous to do something that even a judge who the nation may hold in low esteem, even the argument that, well, it wasn't really contempt because the whole nation knew that she was in the tank for Trump. That's not a defense to a contempt citation. And so he wants to have an order, Merrick Garland does, from a higher court that says, no, that injunction by her is dissolved and you can release the report. But right now he's really on tenterhooks, Mark, because they reported in some of the chyrons that he will release report, or Merrick Garland will release Jack Smith's report, at least to volume one, as to the DC case, the January 6th case. But I think the real reporting is that he told the 11th Circuit, which is reviewing her injunction on an emergency basis, that we have every right in the world to release the first report. They're actually going to stay their hand. And so Trump and his two allies may have gotten quite a long delay of the Mar-a-Lago report. But as to the January 6th report, he says, there's not even an issue here. I should be allowed to release it. I think the way it's going to be played now by the rules is he's going to wait for the 11th Circuit. And the minute the 11th Circuit says, it's fine, Mr. Attorney General Merrick Garland, you can release the January 6th report. I mean, like 10 minutes later, he'll release it. I think Trump's counterplay will be that he'll ask them for a stay, the 11th Circuit, and he'll also have a petition ready in the U.S. Supreme Court asking them for a stay. And so it may be one of those things where, like, at 3:05, the 11th Circuit rules, at 3:07 or at 3:05 itself, they deny the stay. And then Trump asks at 3:06 or 3:07 the U.S. Supreme Court to stay the release of the report. And if there's a couple of minutes in between, then Jack Smith, without violating anybody's order, could release volume one. So this one's going to be really dicey.
This is interesting because there are a couple of legal things here. You pointed to one, which is the one that makes sense, which is there are people mentioned in the report. We talked a little bit about it in your last visit, who are mentioned in the report, and their case and cases would be affected were that report released. And that's the reason that volume two, as you've just suggested, wouldn't be released. The other question was related to the legitimacy of Jack Smith and his appointment. Remember, she weighed in on that. That seems to be something we were talking to Corey Brettschneider, a constitutional lawyer, who was saying this has nothing to do with that because this isn't being released by Jack Smith. Merrick Garland can release it. He's completely legitimate. He's allowed to, essentially release the report on his own. So I can see where the shoe pinches on the first point, which is that people are mentioned in the report who still have ongoing cases. But the second point with Jack Smith's legitimacy, that just is a moot point in this instance, isn't it?
Your other guest may have the A on the constitutional law exam. Because it takes a little bit of a layered, nuanced analysis. But right, if the idea is that Jack Smith doesn't really have any authority, then the argument would go that the Attorney General always had the authority, and it would, go back to him. I guess the counter argument would be that, wait a second, if Merrick Garland didn't do those things, I mean, he maybe supervised them, but he didn't really do those things. Jack Smith did those things, and if Jack Smith had no authority to do those things, it's even worse that we're publishing a report by someone who had no authority to really do the nitty-gritty investigation. But by the way, it is absurd. I rarely say that. I think so many things are arguable in the law, but it is absurd to argue that Jack Smith was not properly appointed as the special counsel because the U.S. Supreme Court has dealt with this issue. There's an argument that, well, they kind of elided the issue. But certainly courts in the D.C. Circuit have absolutely answered this question over and over again. They've all given the same answer, that this is a proper appointment. One of the mistakes tactically that Jack Smith made was to ever take this case to the Southern District of Florida, where he got a 1 in 3 chance of getting the judge that we ironically call loose cannon, and allowing her to say, well, I'm not bound by the D.C. Circuit. I'm in a different circuit. You see, she would have been, if she were in the D.C. Circuit, she would have been bound by all those precedents, which have all ruled that this is a proper appointment. But she could say, well, it's never been decided in this 11th Circuit where I am. And then she can make the argument that some conservative scholars had that supposedly the U.S. Supreme Court elided the issue. I mean, to say that they elided the issue where they allowed all of those special prosecutors, and for that matter, independent counsels, to issue their reports, to indict people, to say the U.S. Supreme Court never really got what the issue was, or they just talking about something else and didn't really meet that issue head on. It's really absurd. But, we've seen this system played over and over again. I mean, one thing that shocks me, and I've said this on your show, how fast TikTok and some of these other appeals are suddenly going after the U.S. Supreme Court was so slothful in the tax case, getting the tax returns of President Trump the first time through. They managed to delay that over 2 years. make the special prosecutor go to make the special prosecutor go twice, or maybe it was the New York Attorney's General office go twice to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's certainly, they look so political and so partisan, the U.S. Supreme Court and the justices appointed by Trump on there in particular, and the 6 Republicans out of 9 in particular, that, you know, things always go fast when Trump or someone else wants them to go fast, but they can always go slow, especially when Trump wants them to go slow in the Supreme Court.
It's asked by Benet, can't Biden just release it because he has immunity, David Katz?
That is not Biden's style. Everyone who's expected Biden to grasp that U.S. Supreme Court decision from last summer and to say, my God, this changes my entire understanding of what I can do as president. Let me start doing some of those things that I have immunity to do and can never be punished for. And so it's the right thing to do. It's not punishable. I'm going to do it. That's just not the way Biden is.
And
so
then
he won't do it. So Biden won't do it. Biden would consider that leaking, even though he is the president.
CC Ryder asks this, Mr. Katz, why hasn't the 11th Circuit disciplined Cannon by now? She has clearly violated her judicial oath under Canon 3C of Code of Judicial Conduct. Appearance of bias is disqualifying.
You know, we had a judge when I was an assistant U.S. attorney and practicing federal criminal law after that, who was just a joke. I mean, really a joke. He was probably the worst judge sitting in America, and worse than Cannon. And everyone said, how come this judge isn't reversed all the time? And they would send a case back to this judge, Mark, who had said something like, I deny this motion because the defendant hasn't proven it. And they would say, no, you have to explain some detail. You have to tell us like what your reasoning is. Okay. And then it would come back after a year and he would say, I deny this motion because my reasoning is the defendant hasn't proven it. And they would send it back to him a third time. And people just sat around like stupefied that they didn't just remand the case to a different judge, which the appellate courts have all the power to do. But the reality is that federal judges, and you know, we need this. The framers thought we needed this to have some individuals with enough power to stand up to huge corporations, to stand up to the government. Now, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say they give them all this power and they put these judges on the throne and they roll over for big companies and they roll over for the government's interest against the individual. But they have to give them this power, and that's certainly how the appellate judges treat them, that, well, so they got it wrong. So this judge that used to sit in LA, that he got it wrong 2 or 3 times in a row, and looked like he was sort of intentionally getting it wrong. Like, ha ha. Supposedly he said at a party, don't believe everything you hear at a party, and certainly don't believe a lot of hearsay. But he said, you know, I can decide him after they remand him a lot faster than they can remand him. It took them all that time. It took the appellate court all that time to think about it with him or with Cannon. And then look at what Cannon does. Cannon came back. She made another egregious error regarding the search, even after they'd made a careful analysis saying that Cannon had gone way too far. And now she's just done this thing. And no, she will not be disciplined. And we'll thank our lucky stars if all that happens is that she gets reversed and we actually get to see that report that we all paid for. And that we have every right in the world to see and analyze about what Trump's involvement was in January 6th. And you can infer, of course, that it was terrible. It sets out chapter and verse of every awful, unlawful thing that Trump did because they were getting to present that criminal case against him. That's what
clearly there's a lot of detail there that is rich with corruption, and we have to see it. But it's a remarkable fact that we're in a country. Corrupt judges protect their own, maybe Phineas says. I mean, there is a quid pro quo that would reflect a kind of corruption on the part of Cannon. And I think she's expecting Donald Trump to knock her down something. I mean,
well, you see, the legal principle, and you can call it a legal fiction if you want to be cynical, but the legal principle is that the appellate judges are not protecting their own, that they really are a different sort of fish. They're the fish who, the famous line from a federal appellate judge that I really liked was, a trial is a search for the truth. An appeal is a search for error. So the idea is that they're very scholarly and they're looking for errors, especially errors that change the outcome. So a harmless error is one that didn't change the outcome. But if there's been a mistake that changed the outcome, normally what we do is we grant a new trial. We say, okay, you ran that race and something unfair happened, so we're going to run that race again. One of the defects in our system is that generally we run that race again in front of the same judge who made poor calls the first time around. And the argument
Right.
against just almost automatically having a new judge is again what your viewer says, that well, they'll look out for each other, the trial judges, and that they'll see a case that came for another judge and they'll think, oh, this lawyer or this client is just a troublemaker. They want some judge other than the judge. We all have lunch together, we're collegial, or he wants a different judge. I don't think that's so much. I think that the judges do come to it with an open view. So I would always want in a case like that a new judge. Virtually always, I would want a new judge, even if they think, oh well, this case or this lawyer is a troublemaker. Judge shopping to another judge on the same court. But the argument is that there's familiarity with what happened, and certainly if that's true, if it's a huge antitrust case, if it's like that case in Washington D.C., which is going to end up getting buried, but that Judge Chutkan, she really did know the case well. When the U.S. Supreme Court sent that case back, it made sense to send that case back to Chutkan and not another judge from that court in D.C. picked at random. But my feeling is that most cases are not that complex, and that in the interest of fairness, it should be sent. If it's going to be remanded for a new trial to run the race again in front of a different judge.
Hotspot says Garland and Biden are so worried about doing the right thing for the history books that they are doing everything wrong in this moment in history. Couldn't agree more. This also from Lama Kumeka, Trump will appoint Cannon to the Supreme Court. That was that quid pro quo I was talking about. Do you buy? I mean, this is really not a legal issue. It's more a kind of a question of your general disability. Here's somebody else. Rich says Supreme Court Justice Eileen Cannon. I mean, she clearly has designs on something, I would think, or maybe she just likes serving Donald Trump what he wants. But might she be served up a seat on the highest court?
I've come to think, this is not like a stringent legal analysis where you
That's
can look
what
at
I mean.
cases
Yeah.
and
Okay.
say there's a curveball in this that I see, and if that curveball is thrown the same way, that's why I'm predicting this case is going to come out. And I do that a lot on your show, and that's why I have this very good record, if I do say so myself, of making predictions, because I try to look at it from a real legal point of view. How do I really think it's going to come out? So trying to do that here, where a lot of it's speculation, yes, I think he will choose her. And I can't see any reason why in the next 2 years, let's say if Thomas resigns, that he wouldn't choose her. If he wants to show the world that it's all about loyalty, picking someone who's not even an appellate judge, but is a district judge, that's normally not the way you get to the U.S. Supreme Court. You get to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is an appellate court, by having served very well on a different appellate court. There's no reason why a district judge wouldn't be very good at it. The judge behind you, have whose portrait I have up, I served with him as his law clerk on the district court. He would have been a great U.S. Supreme Court justice. But the reality is it goes overwhelmingly to appellate judges. So the world would notice that is a true show of loyalty. You stand by Trump, and Trump is going to do things for you, even that are a little unusual, like picking a U.S. district judge, not an appellate judge. And right now he has enough votes. They're talking about getting Hegseth through. They're talking about maybe even getting Kash Patel through. You look at some of the people they're talking about getting through. Certainly we'll know if there are 51, 52 votes to get these very controversial nominations through. There's no doubt that there's 52 or 53 votes to get Cannon through. She was an assistant U.S. attorney, as I was, as our DA Nathan Hochman is, as our Senator Adam Schiff is. And so that's certainly one of the things that gives you cachet as a nominee like it does political candidate, but it gives her cachet. She was an assistant U.S. attorney. She was on the government side at the Department of Justice. And now she's been a federal judge. Yes, the Democrats don't agree with her rulings, but she made them. They're not that outrageous. She doesn't have the kind of corruption things that would really, get you. You know what I mean? We had a judge here on the Ninth Circuit who had to resign, really was forced to resign before a federal judicial inquiry on sexual misconduct. She doesn't have anything like that. So I just can't see why. And why would he be so beholden? I can't think of any other appellate judge that he's really beholden to. The last thing, if some ally of his really, really wanted it, someone like Cruz, although it's questionable whether Cruz, that great line, I think it was Lindsey Graham's, where he said, if Cruz is ever murdered in the Senate, there'll be 100 suspects.
The other thing I thought I heard another version of that, which is Cruz could be killed on the floor, could be murdered on the floor of the Senate, and you could never get a witness for the trial. It was which is a similar thing. I love all the Cruz lines. You know, Al Franken saying, "I was probably Ted Cruz's best friend in the Senate, and I hate Ted Cruz." So
it would be 99 senators, unless they suspected suicide. It would be 99 suspects.
All right, so now I want to go to the sentencing this week, the sentencing in New York. Can you just speak to what's going to happen on that? That's the other Trump issue, the legal, the only case that actually came to term.
I'm going to put my Katz, whatever it was. I was 24-0 at one point, so I guess I might be going 24-1. There was a famous pitcher, and he went 23-1 or something like that. And it's obnoxious to go 24-0. So got to break, got to break the streak. But I think that I'm going to be right on this one. I think the sentencing is going to go forward tomorrow. I don't
think he will be sentenced. Okay, Katz says in the hush money sentencing, it's the election interference thing, but it was the payoff and then the movement of money, et cetera, for the payoff. So the sentencing is supposed to be tomorrow. Yeah, you think it will go on as scheduled?
I think it will go. The New York state courts have made clear they are not going to delay it. The judge has himself made clear that he's not going to sentence Trump to prison or even to, any kind of onerous home detention. He won't have to wear a monitor or something like that. I think he will. They say that he's implied that what he's going to do is say, I'm sentencing you. I'm returning a judgment against you. This is your moment of judgment. That's what happens at the conviction. A lot of people don't think that just being found guilty by a jury is enough for a conviction. Everyone who said he's a convicted felon, you could debate that back and forth, that he's not convicted because the judge could come out tomorrow and he could say, looking at your motion for new trial, I'm giving you a new trial. Looking at your motion for acquittal, I'm acquitting you as a matter of law. And then no conviction, no judgment. So the day of sentencing is the day of judgment. That's the day from which he really is, by any definition, a convicted felon. He doesn't want to go through his presidency, or a lot of it, having everyone say, my God, they just made a convicted felon the leader of the free world. What a disgrace this is. That's what he doesn't want. He doesn't want that talking point against him. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court's going to say that's not what our decision was about in the presidential immunity case last summer. It was not about a talking point. It was not about the fact that people could say really bad stuff about the president. They will say really bad stuff about the president. It's that you really are going to impair the president's duties in a meaningful way. And the sentence that's coming up right now is not going to impair his duties in any meaningful way if all it is that now there's a judgment, you're formally convicted, I'm not imposing any sentence on you. Now you can run up to every court in America that you want and you can complain you didn't have a fair trial and that you ought to have a new trial, or that you should have been acquitted as a matter of law. So I think the sentencing is going to go forward tomorrow. I think the play is not to show up. I think that I think he'll do it by phone. I think while he used to play that to his advantage, I think that he's so close to actually assuming president for the presidency, and it looks so bad. It still looks bad. I know he played it to his advantage, but it still looks bad to show up there with a too long red tie and tie up all the traffic and posture around the courtroom. So that's my guess, that he gets no time.
I would agree. Look, he wanted that audience to deflect, to rationalize, to talk about a witch hunt, et cetera, when he was running for president. He's now won the presidency. He doesn't need to show up and do a press conference there in front of the courthouse. I totally agree with you on that, David Katz. And I'll go even a step further, just in general. He wanted to win the presidency to get out of the legal exposure that he had. That's his whole thing. He doesn't give an S about the rest of this stuff. I think his administration is going to essentially be him on the golf course and, talking about how he's going to buy Greenland and annex Canada and whatever. He'll just make and I think that's all to kind of throw off the scent of the Pete Hegseths and the Tulsi Gabbard appointments, the stinky, stenchy appointments that he has talked about. And by the way, we didn't do this story, but I'll mention it in this context. He was seriously considering Maria Bartiromo to be his vice presidential candidate when he was running. So, his run up to the presidency was marked by all of this bizarre stuff. And he really, now that he's won, he doesn't need to show up to court anymore. So I totally agree with you. I want a quick word, if I can get it from you. Is it the Ninth Circuit? They're ruling on the recording of conversations. This is out of Oregon. Is this right, David? I wonder if you could explain this. This is very important. The idea somehow that you need the consent of both parties or all the parties involved in a conversation of any kind before you can record it.
Well, California and Oregon and some other states have this rule that you cannot just record conversations without the other person's knowing it and without the other person's consent. A lot of people think that they'll have what they'll make you think is a private phone call, and while you think it's private, they're actually recording it, and that they're going to try to use that against you. Now, it's true that they can take notes. They can certainly send you an email. If you send them an email back, that they can use that against you, or a text or anything like that. But there is this sanctity about old-fashioned phone calls. And in particular, so when you hear those things like Michael Cohen wore a wire on Donald Trump, and when Donald Trump said about Stormy Daniels, pay her in cash. And he's actually wearing a wire, Michael Cohen, Trump's attorney is, on Trump. And that was actually, it took a little while to hear, but you could hear it. And of course, it was very damning that he wanted to pay her in cash. It showed again his knowledge that this was an illegal payment, that this was not something you wanted to disclose, but you wanted to cover up. And then people said, oh my God, it's disgraceful, especially California lawyers said, not only is he a lawyer wearing a wire on his client, but that he's wearing a wire and recording anybody without their consent. No, in New York, you're allowed to do that. And in many other states, you're allowed to do it, but not in California and not in Oregon. It's particularly used, Mark, by these sort of guerrilla war right-wingers. And so what they'll do is
Project Veritases of the world.
Right. So they'll get with somebody that they don't like, and they'll be wearing a wire, and they'll be all friendly, and they'll try to get him to say something stupid or embarrassing, and then that's it. Then they can do the endless loop on what's embarrassing. Here's, I don't know, whatever it was, Nancy Pelosi saying, I need to get find a good beauty parlor while it was in the middle of the pandemic. Nancy Pelosi wants a good beauty parlor. While you're suffering, Nancy Pelosi wants to play the endless loop over and over again. And anyway, that issue went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appellate court that covers the entire West Coast. And they said that it was fine to bar that. It was fine to prohibit that. Believe it or not, the right-wing judges, the ones appointed by Trump who were on the panel, dissented and said that it was a content-based distinction because the cops are allowed to do that. Now, to me, I don't understand. There are real conservatives, and I have real respect for them. And there are conservative legal doctrines that are worth debating in law school, in courts, whatever. But they say these things that are so stupid. That's a whole different issue. Of course, law enforcement in all of those states, law enforcement can record you if you're committing a crime. They can have somebody, this domestic violence cases, Mark, they're not sure if it really happened or not or something. It'll often be the woman. They'll have the woman call up and say, oh my God, I'm so traumatized. I woke up this morning. I can't believe what you did to me. You touched me. And then the person says on the other line, no, I didn't. Or they say, I'm really sorry, or I thought you wanted me to. And that's, of course, a key piece of evidence. And all the states allow that. This is a different kettle of fish. And for them to say, well, it's got to be okay for people to go wear wires on each other without consent, without telling them, because law enforcement can do that under proper circumstances. To me, that didn't bolster their argument at all. And I think the Supreme Court will stay away from this one. I think the U.S. Supreme Court will say some states have it, some states don't. They'll see it as kind of, and I think it's very good that we have it in California. I think it's destructive, it's corrosive for people to be running around secretly recording each other.
And again, just to reiterate, the Ninth Circuit ruling that indeed it is upholding the existing law, which requires the mutual consent. This was
which means, Mark, you could. I think it means you could sue Project Veritas for violating your constitutional right to privacy, and make them desist from doing that. Let them be more open. Let them, I mean, journalists ask the person a question, they get an answer, and then they can use the answer right down their notebook.
Sure, sure. Finally, well, before we say goodbye, you've been so generous with your time. Michael D says, Mark, please ask Professor Katz if he thinks Trump will find a way to get flags at full staff for his inauguration. It's not really a legal question, but maybe it is. I don't know, David. Tell me, will he be able to just Bigfoot it and say, I want those flags all the way up? I'll certainly be a minute after he's inaugurated, I would guess that he'll put those flags flying fully.
Well, first of all, if I can just take one more minute of your time, I very much like the appellation Professor Katz.
Yeah,
that would be very nice. I was a professor at Whittier College School of Law, which was terrific. I had one student who became a U.S. district judge. I don't know if anyone's followed poor Whittier Law School, but it's one of the only ABA accredited law schools that ceased to be. Nothing that I did. But I was a professor. So professor and criminal procedure was the main thing that I taught. Although I got to tell one more story. I actually tried a former student of mine in federal court, and he was acquitted, as he deserved to be. And that was an out-of-body experience to be representing my former student in federal court. And someone said to me, well, at least you weren't his ethics professor. I said, actually, he did take professional responsibility with me. I don't think that that's going to happen, although people said that the minute that Trump is president, he might turn around and order the flags not to be at half staff anymore. But I just think that as reckless and as self-destructive as Trump often is, he's going to try to stay away from those things. Like you take the Panama Canal and Greenland. That did not enhance his reputation. That was when he does things like that, just as someone who does not want to see him do well, because I think he's such a harm to the nation and the international community. He took huge steps backwards. We're not going to fight with Denmark over that. Denmark is a NATO ally. He just looked unbelievably foolish, and things that he wants them to do that he might have been able to get some of these NATO countries to, twist their arms to do, they're going to be a lot less receptive. They're going to say, you know what, he's a pig. He's so offensive. He's so obnoxious. I'm not going to do anything that he wants, including things that would have helped him politically. I tell you, I think Trump is going off in way the wrong direction. I think he's going to overplay his hand. I think those nominations, I think they're going to be in trouble. They keep saying, first of all, you have to assume that they don't screw up Mark on the stand, which is what normally happens. You and I have seen the great confirmation battles. They get worse for these controversial candidates once they actually get up there and start answering tough questions. So who do you think is going to do super great at answering tough questions and not hurt their chances of confirmation more? Bobby Kennedy Jr., you think he's going to answer questions great? Tulsi Gabbard, she seems not to be able to fill out the forms on time or get them in. Who else do they have? This Gepseth, he's very good looking. I mean, wow, he should be the head of the Department of Defense because he's very good looking. He's going to sit up there. He's going to look good the first day in front of the public. And then they're going to say, you know what? He's an airhead. He's not capable of running the Department of Defense. And who's the other one? Oh, Patel. Patel's not going to make it. I'm telling you, that's what Schiff just said.
That'd be extraordinary.
Schiff is on the Judiciary Committee. And
well, I mean, David,
these one of the great ones.
Presidents get their appointments through, and I know these guys are, off of a central casting list. Pete Hegseth is only a pretty face, as you say, and Patel is a political henchman. But I hope you're right, of course. But I just think at some point, flooding the zone with all of these picks, some will get rejected, but on some level, they're going to, I think, let some get through. And the last thing I'd say is, you bring an optimism to things that I'm encouraged by, but I see this new media climate as sane washing Trump and sane washing his insane picks. You should watch a little bit of Fox News Channel, and you should listen to a little bit of right-wing radio, the way they justify and rationalize and explain, even the Greenland stuff. I mean, this absurd stuff that, as you suggest, is sort of, it's reputationally harmful. Not really. You watch on Fox News Channel and everybody's beginning to explain that, this is Trump's Louisiana Purchase and it's brilliant. And I mean, it's how they twist and pervert rational thought to justify and sane wash this guy. It's insane. And I think a lot of it's going to be happening around these appointments.
Well, Mark, I'm on Fox and I'm on News Nation sometimes. So I not only see it up close and personal, But I mean, the answer to that one is that Napoleon really needed money, right? The Danes don't need money for Greenland. I know they never argue it or say anything intelligent like that. But you take the Panama Canal, this is a mess. They're going to make the Panama Canal more expensive, more fraught. If you were the head of Panama now, wouldn't you spend money on your military and on your police, just in view of the threats? And then what do you think? How are they going to get the money back for the increased police and army that they need down there? They're going to raise the tolls. And they're just going to pay higher tolls. And all these shippers who are presumably Trump's friends are going to say to him, he's such an idiot. I mean, we knew he was an idiot. He ended up winning. So now we're kissing his butt. But he's such an idiot. All he achieved with this, we're paying much higher tolls for the Panama Canal. What did we just achieve with this?
Everything will blow back on us, sadly. I love our time together. I hope your cold improves. I hope your personal situation related to the wind damage and all the rest, that gets better as well. Thank you for being with us. David is so generous. I'm looking forward to an exciting, eventful year with a lot to comment on. And I appreciate your generosity with your time always. Thanks, David.
I'm actually about to be on a station talking about Carter, because with all that we're suffering out here, it's easy not to think about that. But this was Carter's funeral today. And because I got to his administration when I was 27, I'm someone who's alive today who worked in the Carter administration, and him living to be 100, that's enough to get me on Fox and these other stations, just because, oh my God, here's someone who was in the Carter administration. And I tell him, Mark, like I tell you, don't let my youthful appearance fool you. I was there with Carter.
Well, you're a survivor. I love it. Thanks, David. David Katz, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.